Governor.
Good evening. I'm Tim Pawlenty. I'm a husband. My wife Mary and I have been married for 23 years. I'm the father of two beautiful daughters, Anna and Mara. I'm a neighbor, and I'm running for President of the United States because I love America. But like you, I'm concerned about its future. I've got the experience and the leadership and the results to lead it to a better place.
Governor Pawlenty, answer the critics, and as you do so, who say 5% every year is just unrealistic. And as you do so, where's the proof? Where's the proof that just cutting taxes will create jobs? If that were true, why, during the Bush years, after the big tax cut, where were the jobs?
Well, John, my plan involves a whole plan, not just cutting taxes. We're proposing to cut taxes, reduce regulation, speed up this pace of government, and to make sure that we have a pro-growth agenda. This president is a declinist. He views America as one of equals around the world. We're not the same as Portugal. We're not the same as Argentina. And this idea that we can't have 5% growth in America is hogwash. It's a defeatist attitude. If China can have 5% growth and Brazil can have 5% growth, then the United States of America can have 5% growth. And I don't accept this notion that we're going to be average or anemic. So my proposal has a 5% growth target. It cuts taxes, but it also dramatically cuts spending. We need to fix regulation. We need to have a pro-American energy policy. We need to fix health care policy. And if you do those things as I've proposed, including cut spending, you'll get this economy moving, growing the private economy by shrinking.
Governor, you just heard the governor rebut your characterization of Obamacare. Why?
Let me first say to Sylvia, she has put her finger on one of the most important issues facing the country, which is President Obama stood before the nation in 2008 and said he promised to do health care reform focused on cost containment along with Republicans. He'd do it on a bipartisan basis.
The question, Governor, was why Obamacare?
That's right. Well, I'm going to get to that, John.
You have 30 seconds, Governor.
Yeah. So this is another example of him breaking his promise, and he has to be held accountable. And in order to prosecute the case against President Obama, you have to be able to show that you've got a better plan and a different plan. We took a different approach in Minnesota. We didn't use top-down government mandates and individual requirements from government. We created market alternatives and empowered consumers. I think that's the way to fix health care in the United States of America.
And you don't want to address why you called Governor Romney's Obamacare?
Well, the issue that was raised in a question from a reporter was what are the similarities between the two, and I just cited President Obama's own words that he looked to Massachusetts as a blueprint or a guide when he designed Obamacare.
But you say you were asked a question, which is fair enough, but you chose those words. And so one of my questions is, why would you choose those words, maybe in the comfort of a Sunday show studio? Your rival is standing right there. If it was Obamacare on Fox News Sunday, why is it not Obamacare standing here with the governor right there?
President Obama is the person who I quoted in saying he looked to Massachusetts for designing his program. He's the one who said it's a blueprint in that he merged the two programs, and so using the term Obamacare was a reflection of the president's comments that he designed Obamacare on the Massachusetts health care plan.
Pawlenty, does the congressman have it right?
Well, there's a number of things we need to do to restore manufacturing in this country, and I grew up in a meatpacking town. I grew up in a manufacturing town. I was in a union for 6 or 7 years. I understand what it's like to see the blue-collar communities and the struggles that they've had when manufacturing leaves. So I've seen that firsthand. But number one, we got to have fair trade, and what's going on right now is not fair. I'm for a fair and open trade, but I'm not for being stupid, and I'm not for being a chump. And we have individuals and organizations and countries around this world who are not following the rules when it comes to fair trade. We need a stronger president and somebody who's going to take on those issues. Number two, we need to make the costs and burdens of manufacturing in this country lower. We're asking them to climb the mountain with a big backsack full of rocks on their back, and we have to take the rocks out. One of them is Obamacare. I met somebody in Arizona the other day who's moving his whole company out of the country just because of Obamacare. The taxes are too high, the regulations are too heavy, the permitting is too slow, and the message everywhere around this country from business leaders, large and small, including manufacturing, is get the government off my back. As president, I will.
My question is, where do you fall on right to work, and would you support a federal right to work law?
We live in the United States of America, and people shouldn't be forced to belong or be a member in any organization, and the government has no business telling people what group you have to be a member of or not. I support strongly right-to-work legislation. I got one more thing, Tony. Like I said, for much of his life, my dad was a Teamster truck driver. My brothers and sisters, many of our in unions. I was in a union. We grew up in a blue-collar town. I understand these issues. My family were Reagan Democrats. Now, most of them listen to Rush Limbaugh, actually. But the point is, I understand these issues. But we don't have a government tell us what organizations or associations we should be in. We tell the government what to do.
President Obama effectively killed government-run spaceflight to the International Space Station and wants to turn it over to private companies. In the meantime, U.S. astronauts would ride Russian spacecraft at a cost of $50 to $63 million a seat. What role should the government play in future space exploration?
I think the space program has played a vital role for the United States of America. I think in the context
in the
context of our budget challenges, it can be refocused and reprioritized. But I don't think we should be eliminating the space program. We can partner with private providers to get more economies of scale and scale it back. But I don't think we should eliminate the space program.
Governor Pawlenty, I'd like to go back to you. Let's talk about housing. Roughly right now, there are about a million homes in the hands of banks and lenders. Millions of more homeowners are upside down, meaning they owe more than their home is worth. What would you or your administration do to try to right the housing ship?
Well, the first thing we need to do is get the government out of crony capitalism. We have this alliance between big government, big unions, and certain big bailout businesses. And as Congressman Paul said a few minutes ago, we had politicians in Congress trying to micromanage the housing market, and they created a bubble, and they created the mess. And now we have all these innocent bystanders, the good people of the United States of America, middle income and modest income people who've been devastated by this. And so the market is going to have to adjust. The programs that President Obama has put forward haven't really worked. They've been a failure. They've been slow. They haven't really solved the problem. But the best thing that we can do is get the economy moving again. And it's not going to happen by growing government. His way failed. We've got to get the private sector going. We have to have people starting businesses, growing businesses, building things, starting places of employment. This is how we're going to get money back in people's pockets and get them financially stable.
So Paul says opt out. Congressman Ryan says squeeze a lot of savings across the federal budget, including a lot out of Medicare, to turn it into, and he doesn't like this word, but turn it essentially into a voucher program. Instead of having the federal program, the government would give you some money and you'd go out in the marketplace and shop for it. Is that the right way to do it?
Let me first address the doctor. Doctor, you said in your question that you paid in your whole life, and we respect that. People have made plans, particularly people who are on the program now or close to eligibility. We should keep our word to people that we've made promises to. So under my proposal, if you're on the program or near the program, we'll keep our word. But we also have to recognize what Congressman Paul just said. There was a recent report out that the premiums for Medicare and the payroll withholdings are only paying about half the program. So it is not financially solvent. We have to fix it. We have to reform it. I'm going to have my own plan, John, that will feature some differences from Congressman Ryan's plan. It'll feature performance pay rather than just volume pay to hospitals and clinics and providers. It will allow Medicare to continue as an option, but it'll be priced against various other options that we're going to offer people as well, and some other things. And I also said, if it was a choice between Barack Obama's plan of doing nothing, we have a president of the United States, got one of the worst crises financially in the history of the country, and you can't find him on these issues. He's missing. I'll lead on this issue.
Paul says opt out. Congressman Ryan says squeeze a lot of savings across the federal budget, including a lot out of Medicare, to turn it into, and he doesn't like this word, but turn it essentially into a voucher program. Instead of having the federal program, the government would give you some money and you'd go out in the marketplace and shop for it. Is that the right way to do it?
Let me first address the doctor. Doctor, you said in your question that you paid in your whole life, and we respect that. People have made plans, particularly people who are on the program now or close to eligibility. We should keep our word to people that we've made promises to. So under my proposal, if you're on the program or near the program, we'll keep our word. But we also have to recognize what Congressman Paul just said. There was a recent report out that the premiums for Medicare and the payroll withholdings are only paying about half the program. So it is not financially solvent. We have to fix it. We have to reform it. I'm going to have my own plan, John, that will feature some differences from Congressman Ryan's plan. It'll feature performance pay rather than just volume pay to hospitals and clinics and providers. It will allow Medicare to continue as an option, but it'll be priced against various other options that we're going to offer people as well, and some other things. And I also said, if it was a choice between Barack Obama's plan of doing nothing, we have a president of the United States, got one of the worst crises financially in the history of the country, and you can't find him on these issues. He's missing. I'll lead on this issue.
Are you a George W. Bush Republican, meaning a constitutional amendment to ban same-sex marriage, or a Dick Cheney Republican who, like I believe the Congresswoman just said, says this should be made, this decision, same-sex marriage, should be a state's decision?
John, I support a constitutional amendment to define marriage as between a man and a woman. I was the co-author of the state law in Minnesota to define it, but now we have courts jumping over
let's just go through. The Obama administration is in the process, and Leon Panetta, as the new defense secretary, will implement essentially the repeal of Don't Ask, Don't Tell. So gays will be allowed to serve openly in the military. I want to ask each of you, and again, if we can be quickly, because then we want to get to the voters' questions. If you become president of the United States, now gays are allowed to serve openly in the military. Would you leave that policy in place, or would you try to change it? Go back to Don't Ask, Don't Tell, or something else?
John, we're a nation at two wars. I think we need to pay deference to our military commanders, particularly our combatant commanders. And in this case, I would take my cues from them as to how this affects the military going forward. I know they expressed concerns, many of the combatant commanders did, when this was originally repealed by the Obama administration.
Hi, John. Representative Bachmann, I have a question for you. Governor Pawlenty says he opposes abortion rights, except in cases of rape, incest, or when the mother's life is at stake. Do you have any problem with that position, and if so, why?
Governor Pawlenty, it was your position that was brought into the question. We'll give you a few seconds.
Well, this is a great example where we can look at our records. The National Review Online, which is a conservative publication, said based on results, not just based on words, I was probably the most pro-life candidate in this race. As governor of the state of Minnesota, I appointed to the Supreme Court, a conservative court for the first time in the modern history of my state. We passed the most pro-life legislation any time in the modern history of the state, which I proposed and signed, including women's right to know, including positive alternatives to abortion legislation, and many others. I'm solidly pro-life. The main pro-life organization in Minnesota gives me very, very high marks. And I haven't just talked about these things, I've done it.
As Governor Pawlenty, do you support then? Arizona has its version. Parts of an employee enforcement law have been upheld. The big SB 1070 make its way to the Supreme Court. Alabama just has a new bill. Would you want to be president of the United States in which each state can decide what it does? Or would you make the point, look, this is a federal purview, period?
I'm a strong supporter of states' rights, but if the federal government won't do its job, in this case protecting and securing our border, then let the states do it, and they will. And when President Bush asked governors to volunteer their National Guard to go to the border to help reinforce through Operation Jumpstart our border, I was one of the few governors who did it. I sent Minnesota National Guard there to reinforce the border, and it works. And that's what we need to do. And by the way, this issue of birthright citizenship, again, brings up the importance of appointing conservative justices. That result is because the U.S. Supreme Court determined that that right exists, notwithstanding language in the Constitution. I'm the only one up here, I believe I'm the only one up here who's appointed solidly, reliably conservative appointees to the court.
I want to do one more.
Osama bin Laden is dead. We've been in Afghanistan for 10 years. Isn't it time to bring our combat troops home from Afghanistan?
The strikes in Yemen have been targeted at al-Qaeda leaders, al-Qaeda operatives, who the President of the United States, who happens to be a Democrat in this case, views as serious threats against this nation. Do you agree with Congressman Paul there, or do you agree with President Obama and the strikes?
Let me first say to John, thank you for your family's commitment to our nation, to your service, to the sacrifices that you've made, and to the burdens that you bear. I know I speak for everyone in this room and all across this country when we say we're grateful to you. We wouldn't have the country without people like you and your sons. Thank you very much. And beyond that, John, I start with this perspective. On September 11, 2001, individuals and groups killed 3,000 or so of our fellow Americans. They would have killed not 3,000, but 30,000 or 300,000 or 3 million or 30 million if they could have. If they could have had the capability to do that in their hands. And as soon as they get it, they'll try. And the first duty of the President of the United States and the leader of this nation and Commander-in-Chief is to make sure this nation is safe. So you bet, if there are individuals I have intelligence on or groups in Yemen that present a threat to our security interests in that region or to the United States of America, you can bet they'll hear from me and we'll continue those bombings.
All right, let's stay on 2008 and the process. President Obama made a pick. Senator McCain made a pick. Who made the best choice?
Senator Biden has been wrong about every major strategic decision in the modern history of the international conflict and military. Look at his judgment about partitioning Iraq, for example. You know, now we have Iraq being probably one of the shining examples of success in the Middle East. If Vice President Biden would have had his way, we would have had a partitioned Iraq and probably more mayhem in the Middle East. I think Governor Palin's a remarkable leader. I think she's qualified to be President of the United States. I think she's equally as qualified or more qualified and would have been as strong of a president as Joe Biden. He's wrong on everything.